For 40 years of sacrifice, one moment of enjoyment was treated like a sin. That is the bitter truth of my life. For 40 years I worked as a supply director. I was never late to work. I never wasted a single vacation day. I lived for my family. For the past 12 years I wore only one pair of leather boots. They were worn out. The soles had been completely worn down and stitched back together 3 times. I never minded spending less on myself. I only wanted to give my children the very best. I paid for their college tuition. I paid for their homes. I even paid for the cars they drive. I thought that was love. But I was wrong. Welcome back to Dad's Real Life Revenge. Grab a drink, some snacks, get comfortable, and remember the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing, they simply chose not to. Leave a number 1 in the comments so we can continue the story, and hit subscribe, you're going to enjoy this one. Last Friday afternoon I walked into a car dealership. I signed the paperwork to buy a white BMW 7 Series worth $85,000. I paid for it entirely in cash. It was the first time in my life that I had done something completely for myself. I sat inside the car for 11 minutes. The engine purred quietly. The scent of luxurious new leather filled the cabin. I closed my eyes. I allowed myself to feel the personal success I had earned after nearly half a century of dedication. That moment felt sacred. I was so proud. I thought my children would be proud of their father too. But when I drove home, I realized how naive I had been. The BMW's engine went silent in front of the house. I stepped out of the car excited like a father eager to share good news with his children. But there was no hug. There wasn't even a single word of congratulations. Ethan and Emily were standing on the front porch. Their eyes were not on me. They were staring at the new car. Emily folded her arms across her chest. Her gaze moved along the sleek body of the vehicle as if she were examining a crime scene. She did not see my years of hard work. She only saw a large asset that had just slipped out of her reach. Ethan stepped closer. He tapped his finger against the hood. The dry knocking sound echoed in the air. He turned to me with a cold expression. The first thing he said was not, "Dad, did you buy a new car?" Instead, he asked, "How much money from this family did this car eat up?" "Dad," I stood still. The evening breeze felt icy. I tried to keep my voice calm. "I bought it with my own money. $85,000. Emily let out a mocking laugh. She stepped forward, her voice sharp with judgment. $85,000 in cash. Are you crazy? Do you know how many things that money could have paid for? I need to move into a bigger apartment downtown. Ethan wants to expand his business, and you throw a pile of money away on this luxury toy." Ethan nodded in agreement. He pulled out his phone and kept tapping on the screen. He did not even bother to look me in the eye while speaking. Then he casually said, "You're living way too extravagantly, Dad. You need to cut back on your spending. You're getting old. What do you need a luxury car like this for? You should be thinking about us. We're the ones who need money to build our future. Since when did you become so selfish?" Every word felt like a knife driven straight into my chest. For 40 years I wore worn-out boots so they could wear designer clothes. I lived on hamburgers so they could enjoy expensive dinners at upscale restaurants. Now, for the first time in my life, I had spent money on myself. Money that I had earned through years of hard work, late nights, and early mornings. Yet in their eyes I had become a selfish man. I looked at the 2 children I had carried, raised, and cared for over more than 20 years. I saw no love. I saw only endless entitlement and greed. They viewed my money as their default inheritance. They viewed my sacrifices as an obligation. I did not argue. I did not yell. A man who had spent 40 years in the business world understood that words spoken in anger were useless. I simply picked up my car keys and walked past them into the house. My wife Sarah was standing in the living room. She looked at me with concern and sympathy. She had heard the entire conversation outside. I signaled for her to remain silent. I went straight upstairs. I entered my private office and locked the door behind me. The room fell into complete silence. My frustration had reached its limit, but alongside the disappointment came a frightening sense of clarity. I sat down in my old leather chair and turned on my computer. I logged into my personal bank account. It was time to face the truth. It was time to expose the real faces behind my obedient children. I began printing every detailed bank statement from the past several years. What appeared on the computer screen left even me stunned. A plan began to take shape in my mind. The printer hummed continuously in my office. Sheet after sheet of crisp white paper slowly emerged. They carried cold, unforgiving black numbers. I picked up the stack of documents and began highlighting entries with a yellow marker. The more lines I underlined, the more my hand trembled in disbelief. I discovered that I was paying for an entire list of services I had never used even once. There were a total of 41 recurring monthly payments. Every single one was being automatically withdrawn directly from my bank account. They all belonged to my two know-it-all children, Ethan and Emily. I began reading each item aloud in the darkness of the room. The monthly payment on Ethan's Audi, of $5,724. His premium auto insurance, $210 a month. Emily's membership at a 5-star gym, $150 a month. The premium Netflix subscription. The family Spotify account. Hulu and HBO subscriptions. The entire high-speed internet bill for Emily's downtown apartment. Even their electricity bills, water bills, and weekly housekeeping services. Month after month, year after year, they had been quietly draining money from my account as though it were the most natural thing in the world. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My instincts, sharpened by 40 years as a supply director, told me one thing. I had spoiled them too much. I had turned my own children into financial and technological parasites. They used my money to enjoy a luxurious lifestyle. They used my money to impress their friends. Yet when I bought a car for myself after 40 years of relentless work, they stood in front of me and told me I was living too extravagantly. They told me I needed to cut back on my spending. A cold smile appeared on my face. The pain and disappointment I had felt earlier were gone. In their place stood a hard, unwavering determination. All right, my dear children. You want your father to cut expenses, then I will do exactly what you asked. I will reduce my spending in the most thorough way possible. I placed the file on my desk. Then I picked up my phone and opened the credit card management app. My finger stopped over the section for automatic payments. I knew exactly where to begin. The first domino had to fall, and it would be a direct blow to Ethan's arrogance. I disabled the automatic renewal for the very first payment. A sharp click echoed through the darkness. The first decisive strike had been launched. Ethan would be the first to experience what independence truly felt like. How would he react when the bank froze the financing on his luxury car? The following Monday morning, I sat at the dining table in the living room. I slowly sipped a cup of hot black coffee and glanced at the clock. Exactly 8:30 in the morning. At that exact time every month, the bank would automatically withdraw $724 from my account to make the payment on Ethan's Audi, a 5. But today the system would report an error. I had canceled that payment 2 days earlier. At exactly 8:45, the phone lying on the table began vibrating furiously. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. I did not answer right away. I let it ring 5 times before casually putting the call on speaker. On the other end, Ethan sounded panicked and out of breath. Dad, something terrible just happened. The bank sent me a message saying my car payment account is overdue. They said the automatic payment from your card was declined. It's a system error, right? Please check it right away. I'm about to meet an important business partner. I can't have my car account flagged or have the bank calling me. It's humiliating. I leaned back in my chair. My voice remained calm and steady. There's no system error, Ethan. I canceled that payment myself. The line went completely silent for 3 seconds. The silence of a major shock. Then Ethan's voice shot up in disbelief and anger. What did you just say? You canceled it. Why would you do that? That's my car. If the payment is late, they'll charge penalties. They'll lower my credit score. Do you know how serious that is? What kind of game are you playing? I picked up my coffee cup and slowly turned it in my hand. Then I replied using the very words he had thrown at me 3 days earlier. I'm just cutting expenses, Ethan. That's what you told me to do. You said I was living too extravagantly and needed to save money. I think you made a very good point. That Audi is registered in your name. You're 28 years old. You're proud of being a successful businessman. Then paying for your own car seems completely reasonable. I'm simply following your advice. Ethan roared into the phone. But those are two completely different things. I told you to cut your spending, not mine. This is selfish. You're ruining my business. I did not give him the opportunity to continue shouting. I ended the call. Then I blocked Ethan's number for 2 hours and left him to deal with the bank on his own. I looked out the window. My white BMW was still sitting quietly in the sunlight. A strange sense of satisfaction ran down my spine. The first domino had fallen. Ethan had received his first lesson about the value of money. But my plan did not stop there. Ethan was only the opening move. My next target was Emily, the princess who loved social media appearances and spent money like water. I knew she was about to have a morning she would never forget. One by one, her favorite services would disappear in the most ruthless way possible. I was curious to see how my beloved daughter would manage when the luxurious world she depended on began to collapse completely. Tuesday was the day Emily's world collapsed. My youngest daughter loved living a perfect life on social media. She woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The first thing she did was turn on the television and open Netflix. Her routine was to watch trending dramas while doing yoga. But that morning, the screen displayed only a cold red message: "Your subscription has been canceled. Please update your payment method." Emily frowned in annoyance. She assumed it was nothing more than a minor internet problem. She picked up her phone and opened Spotify. Another message appeared. "Your account has been downgraded to the free plan. No more skipping endless advertisements." The frustration began to build inside the 26-year-old princess. She decided to get dressed and head to her 5-star gym downtown. It was the place where she checked in every morning. When she reached the front desk, Emily confidently swiped her membership card. A sharp beep sounded. A red light flashed. The receptionist looked at Emily with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Miss Miller. Your membership has been suspended. This month's membership fee from Mr. Arthur Miller's card was declined." Emily's face turned red with embarrassment. People nearby began whispering. She had no choice but to leave in complete humiliation. But the worst part of the nightmare happened when she returned to her apartment. Her tablet could not connect to the internet. Her phone had no Wi-Fi signal. The wireless router in the apartment was blinking with an error light. I had canceled the $60 per month high-speed internet plan that I had been paying for on her behalf for the past 3 years. Her luxury apartment had suddenly become a lonely island. She could not browse social media. She could not post carefully staged photos. She was completely cut off from the online world. Emily lost her mind. She immediately called her mother. Sarah was sitting beside me in the living room when the call came in. I motioned for my wife to put the call on speaker. Emily's crying and shouting exploded through the phone. "Mom, Dad has gone crazy, hasn't he? He cut off everything. My gym membership is suspended. Netflix is gone. Even my Wi-Fi has been disconnected. I can't work. I can't live like this. Tell Dad to turn everything back on right now. I'm his daughter. Why is he being so cruel to me?" Sarah looked at me with a pleading expression. She wanted to defend our daughter. But I gently placed a hand on my wife's shoulder. Then I looked directly at the phone that was broadcasting Emily's hysterics. My voice was cold and firm. "She's 26 years old. If she can't afford $60 a month for internet service, then that's the real problem." Emily instantly fell silent. She had not expected me to be listening. I continued. "You and Ethan told me I needed to cut my spending. That's exactly what I'm doing. Learn to pay for your own luxuries, Emily." I ended the call. Then I turned towards Sarah. My wife sighed deeply, but she did not argue anymore. She understood what I was doing. But my stubborn children were not ready to surrender so easily. They still believed I was merely throwing a temporary tantrum. They decided to join forces against me. What Ethan and Emily did not know was that I had already prepared the next technological punishment, a strike aimed directly at the one thing they could not live without for even a second in this modern world. Soon they would learn what true inconvenience felt like. After the shock of losing their Wi-Fi and entertainment services, Ethan and Emily came up with a new plan. They assumed their father had only canceled a few individual payments. In their minds, they still had one final fortress left standing: the family mobile phone plan. It was the most expensive package offered by the carrier. The account was under my name, and I paid every penny of it. Unlimited 5G data. They used it to tether their laptops. They used it to maintain their luxurious online lifestyles. They thought I did not know. But they underestimated the instincts of a supply director. I checked the carrier's online dashboard and noticed the data usage on both of their devices had suddenly skyrocketed. They were deliberately trying to work around me. I smiled. I did not cut off their phones entirely. If I disconnected the service, they would simply go sign up for their own plans. I wanted them to experience frustration slowly. I logged into the family administrator account. I opened the bandwidth control settings. Then I pressed confirm. Their blazing fast 5G service was instantly throttled down to 2G speeds, the speed of 2 decades ago. The real technological nightmare began. Imagine living in the year 2026 while using internet speeds from the year 2000. Ethan was at his office trying to send an important file to a business partner. The upload bar moved only 1% every 10 minutes. He repeatedly turned airplane mode on and off, but nothing changed. The screen displayed nothing except an endless spinning loading icon. Meanwhile, Emily was sitting in an upscale coffee shop. She wanted to upload a short video complaining about me to her friends. The video would not upload. Even simple text messages took several minutes to send. Their phones had become little more than expensive bricks. That afternoon, both of them stormed into my house. They did not knock. They shoved the front door open and marched into the living room with faces red from anger. Ethan slammed his phone onto the table. "What did you do to our phone service? I lost a major contract today because I couldn't send my documents." "Are you trying to destroy your son's career?" Emily immediately joined in. "I can't even open a website. You cut off our phones, didn't you?" I sat calmly on the sofa, casually turning the pages of a financial newspaper. I looked up at the two children, trembling with rage. My voice remained steady and emotionless. "I didn't cut off your phones. I'm simply reducing expenses. You'll have to find public Wi-Fi to send your emails. I think that unlimited plan is too extravagant and wasteful. I need to save money to maintain my new BMW." Ethan clenched his teeth. "Stop being so selfish. You're torturing us over a car." I stood up and looked directly into his eyes. "I'm only living the way you wanted me to live. You should get used to it." The tension inside the Miller household reached its breaking point. Both children stormed out, swearing they would never come back or speak to me again. But they had no idea that I was already preparing my next move. A rumor would soon be released, one that would awaken their greed and force them to crawl right back to this house. A psychological trap was about to be set. A week after the 2G data war, the house fell into an unsettling silence. Sarah looked at me with sadness in her eyes. She set a plate of pastries on the dining table and let out a quiet sigh. "Arthur, please. You've taught them enough. They've learned their lesson. Don't make things any more tense. I'm their mother. It hurts me to see them like this." I took my wife's hand and looked deeply into her eyes. "Trust me this time, Sarah. If we give in now, they'll never grow up. I have a bigger plan." I began putting the next step into motion. A powerful psychological trap. I arranged to meet Logan, my talkative cousin's son, at a small coffee shop. I deliberately let him glimpse a few documents bearing the seal of a law office. Then I pretended to be slightly drunk and let a few careless remarks slip out. I told him that I was setting up a secret trust fund. Every asset I had accumulated throughout my life, including this house, would be locked inside it. No one would be able to touch a single dollar without approval from the attorney. I knew Logan would never be able to keep that secret. Just as I expected, the news reached Ethan and Emily like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. Their attitudes changed 180 degrees overnight. The anger disappeared. In its place came absolute panic. They were terrified of losing what they believed was their future inheritance. The next morning, the doorbell rang repeatedly. Ethan walked into the house wearing a bright smile. He carried a cup of my favorite coffee. "Dad, I was driving by on my way to work, so I picked this up for you." "How have you been lately?" Emily appeared right behind him, carrying an expensive box of pastries. "Your favorite daughter missed you and Mom, so I came to visit. Let me help Mom clean the house." The flattery was obvious. The kindness felt rehearsed. They suddenly acted like perfect children. I could see through every second of their performance. Greed had brought them right back into the trap I had carefully prepared. If you've made it this far, then perhaps you're enjoying the story. Please do us a quick favor, like and subscribe. Leave a number 5 in the comments so I know you've watched this far, and tell me how you think the story will end to see whether your prediction is right. Many people watch without doing that, but it costs nothing and means a great deal to us. I looked at my two children as they hovered around me, eager to please. A knowing smile crossed my face. Then I made an offer. "This Sunday evening, come home for dinner. I have a surprise gift for both of you." Their eyes lit up instantly. They nodded enthusiastically. They believed they were about to receive their share of the trust fund. But what awaited them at the Sunday dinner table was not a stack of $1,000 checks. It was a storm so devastating that neither of them would ever forget it for the rest of their lives. At exactly 7 o'clock on Sunday evening, the front door opened. Ethan and Emily walked in wearing the brightest smiles I had ever seen on their faces. Their artificial politeness filled the entire house. Ethan eagerly rushed into the kitchen to help his mother carry the food to the table. He repeatedly praised Sarah's barbecue ribs, calling them the best he had ever tasted. Emily settled beside me on the sofa. She chatted cheerfully about her future plans and made sure to pour me a glass of water whenever it was half empty. They were putting on quite a performance. The promise of a multi-million-dollar trust fund had transformed two entitled children into the most devoted son and daughter imaginable. Dinner unfolded in an atmosphere so warm it felt almost suffocating. Sarah watched the children laughing and smiling, and her heart began to soften. I felt differently. I saw through every glance they exchanged. Every time Ethan looked toward me, his eyes inevitably drifted toward the thick blue folder resting on a cabinet nearby. They were impatient. They were waiting for the moment I would pull out a check worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and divide the fortune between them. They believed this temporary obedience would purchase a lifetime of luxury without effort. Dinner finally ended. I stood and walked to the cabinet. Then I picked up the folder. Both Ethan and Emily immediately straightened in their chairs. Their eyes lit up with anticipation. Neither of them knew that the folder contained exactly 144 pages. I returned to the dining table. Then I placed the folder directly in the center. The heavy thud echoed through the room. The cheerful, artificial atmosphere vanished instantly. Silence settled over the house. Not ordinary silence. The kind of silence that hangs over a courtroom moments before a verdict is delivered. Sarah looked nervously from me to the children. Her fingers intertwined tightly in her lap. I sat down at the head of the table. My gaze swept across my son and daughter. The excitement on their faces slowly gave way to confusion. Ethan swallowed hard. Trying to sound casual, he asked, "Dad, is this the trust fund paperwork you mentioned? How are you planning to divide it between Emily and me?" Emily leaned forward slightly. Her hands trembled. I did not answer Ethan's question. Instead, I rested my hand on the thick folder. Within those 144 pages lived countless memories, sleepless nights, sacrifices, and the pain of a father who felt betrayed. I looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Then I turned toward Emily. My voice became lower, colder, and more authoritative than ever. "I spent the entire week preparing this gift for both of you. I think you deserve to know the truth before we discuss any trust fund. These 144 pages contain the complete financial history of your lives. But they are not family photographs. They are something else. Something the two of you have spent years trying to forget." Ethan and Emily exchanged uneasy glances. The last traces of confidence vanished from their faces. Fear began to emerge. Their complexions turned pale. For the first time they realized that something was terribly wrong. This was not an inheritance meeting. This was a trap. Slowly I opened the folder to the first page. The first numbers appeared. Huge numbers. Numbers representing burdens I had quietly carried on their behalf for years. I looked at my children and prepared to deliver the decisive blow. The horrifying truth behind $1.2 million was about to be exposed. As the first page of the thick folder was opened, I looked up at my two children sitting silently across from me like defendants awaiting a verdict. The confidence and fake smiles that had been plastered across Ethan's and Emily's faces were completely gone. The large living room had fallen into such complete silence that I could hear their strained breathing. I began to speak. My voice was calm, cold, and firm. Numbers have no emotions. They only tell the truth. That's what I learned after 40 years as a supply director. And today, I want both of you to look directly at that truth. I turned the first page. The rustling paper sounded painfully loud. "Emily, this section is yours. 4 years of tuition at a private university, $160,000. 3 years of rent for your luxury downtown apartment, $90,000. Clothing, cosmetics, gym memberships, and vacation expenses paid through your supplemental credit card, $120,000. Emily pressed her lips together. The color drained from her face. She tried to speak, but I raised a hand and signaled for silence. Then I turned to Ethan's section. "Ethan, your turn. Tuition and living expenses, $140,000. The down payment I gave you for your first house, $150,000. The business capital I loaned you to start your company and never saw repaid, $200,000. Car payments, insurance, and repair costs over the years, $80,000. I continued flipping through the pages. internet bills, electric bills, health insurance premiums, airline tickets. Every expense was documented down to the last cent. Not a single day missing, not a single item overlooked. Then I slammed the file shut. The sharp crack echoed through the room. Both of them flinched. I looked directly at my children. Then I emphasized the final number listed on the last page. Everything I have spent on the two of you during the 22 years since you became adults comes to a total of $1.2 million. $1.2 million earned through my sweat, my sacrifices, and decades of work. I stood up. Placing both hands on the table, I leaned forward. My eyes burned with a fury directed at their selfishness. My $85,000 car is extravagant. Then what exactly is $1.2 million? It was only one question, but it carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Both children lowered their heads. Neither could look me in the eye. Ethan finally stammered, "Dad, we know we were wrong, but we're your children. You work to take care of us." I let out a harsh laugh. A dry, bitter laugh. Taking care of your children does not mean encouraging ingratitude. Do you think money falls from the sky? You treated your parents' sacrifices as if they were obligations. When I finally rewarded myself after 40 years of wearing worn-out boots, you stood in the driveway and called me selfish. Is that how you treat the father who raised you? Emily broke down in tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please don't lock everything into the trust. I looked at both of them with cold eyes. The trust is real. I signed the documents this afternoon. All $3 million of your mother's and my assets are now secured inside it, but don't expect to receive a single dollar unless you meet my conditions. Ethan looked up. Hope and fear mixed in his eyes. What conditions? I delivered my ruling. Ethan, you must keep your business operating without bankruptcy and pay all of its expenses yourself for the next 2 years. Emily, you must pay your own rent and living expenses for the next 18 months. My attorney will review your financial records every month. If either of you misses a payment even once, or if you ask your mother for money, every dollar in that trust will be transferred to charity after your mother and I pass away. You will inherit nothing. Ethan and Emily froze. For the first time, they understood that the game was over. There was no escape route left. But wounded pride and injured greed drove them toward a reckless decision right there in the living room. Their anger exploded. And in that moment, the story rushed toward an ending that even I had never anticipated. Ethan jumped to his feet. He shoved his chair backward, his face twisted with anger and humiliation. Fine, Dad. You use money to humiliate us. We don't need your damn money anymore. Emily stood up as well. She wiped away her tears and looked at me with resentment. You're a cold-hearted father. One day you'll regret treating us like this. They turned and walked away. Their footsteps thundered across the hardwood floor. A moment later, the front door slammed shut with tremendous force. The entire house seemed to shake. The pretense was gone. Only emptiness remained. Sarah collapsed onto the sofa. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Oh, Arthur, they're really gone. They hate us now. Wasn't this too harsh? I walked over, sat beside her, and wrapped an arm around her trembling shoulders. Gently, I tried to comfort her. Don't cry, Sarah. They'll be all right. For the first time in their lives, they have to learn how to be adults. If we keep giving them money, they'll remain selfish children forever. This is the only way to save their future. The next morning, I woke up early. I no longer had to worry about 41 unreasonable payments draining my account. I walked into the garage. I opened the door of my white BMW 7 Series. The engine started smoothly. I drove out of the driveway and headed toward the countryside. Sarah sat beside me in the passenger seat, her hand tightly holding mine. The morning sun painted the road ahead in brilliant gold. I glanced into the rearview mirror. The old house was slowly disappearing behind us. Then I looked down at the shoes on my feet. They were no longer the worn-out boots I had worn for 12 years. They were a new pair of leather shoes, comfortable, sturdy, and well-earned. At that moment, I realized a profound truth. The greatest inheritance parents can leave their children is not a mountain of money. The greatest inheritance is independence and the ability to stand on their own 2 feet. Indulgence given in the wrong way destroys children. Sometimes they must stumble before they can learn how to rise on their own. Thank you for joining us on Dad's Real-Life Revenge. Don't forget to share your own story in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next hard-earned lesson. My children received the most important lesson of their lives, but change does not happen overnight. I never expected them to understand immediately. I did not need that. What I needed was for them to experience life for themselves and discover the right path on their own. One day they would understand that the greatest asset parents possess is not money. It is their children themselves.